G'day ladies and gents, and welcome to Cyberpunk 2077. So I did say that I was going to do a series on this one, however before I start I wanted to do a nice little non-spoiler video talking about the game and giving you my opinions of it. So the footage in this video is taken from Act 1 and early Act 2, and it's just a little street driving and some of the smaller street crime encounters. There are no story missions or cutscenes in this video. The video has been edited to remove any messages or audio clips that could even slightly refer to story elements, and while I will be talking about it, I won't be showing the inventory system or the skill system in this video either, because there are actually some spoilers in there as well. So if you wanted a pure spoiler-free take on the game, here it is, and I'll be doing this in 3 stages. First we'll talk about the mechanics, then we'll talk about the story and my impressions, and again, no spoilers will be in there, and then last of all we'll talk about the bugs and performance. Okay, so anyways, let's cut through all the hype and bull. The main question, what is Cyberpunk 2077? Well, put simply, it's Deus Ex meets Grand Theft Auto 5 with a point and percentage skill system and a pretty much standard colour-based gear levelling system in tow. That's not to say that it's bad, just that there are very few new gameplay systems in place here. What we see instead is a collection of well-known gameplay systems represented reasonably well, though not perfectly. The driving sits somewhere between GTA 5 and an Ubisoft open world game in terms of feel, with a few off physics issues, such as the cars feeling in many ways lighter and less stable than the bikes when driven at high speed. The shooting mechanics are straightforward and better than I would have expected, although they still suffer from a bit of jank, with less fluid control than you would expect at lower levels, although some of that does get addressed in the progression system, which I'll come to in a moment. The melee system is pretty bare bones. While it can be very effective in terms of damage, the system is pretty much limited to a light attack, a heavy charged attack, and a block. And when in a fight with another melee opponent, blocking the opponent the second before their blow lands will trigger an automatic full damage block and a counter blow, but that's really the entire system. The hacking system is essentially Cyberpunk 2077's answer to magic, with a variety of software options allowing you to ping enemies, revealing the locations of all nearby enemies in that group, shutting off their optical implants, blinding them, causing their cybernetics to overload doing damage, or at higher levels, just straight up turning people's cybernetics off and taking them out of the fight. The same system can be used to hack the environment, causing distractions, taking control of security cameras, allowing you to look around the environment, or to simply blind the security system, and again to cause environmental damage. It's generally more crowd control focused than direct combat, with the limitation on how much you can do being in the form of RAM availability on your cyber deck. Each ability that you equip to your cyber deck as a spell or a piece of software costs a certain amount of RAM, and once it's used, it stays used for the duration of combat, or if you have the right perks and abilities, until it refreshes, which is around 60 seconds. Upgrading your intelligence stat and your cyber deck increases the amount of RAM that you can have available, but as you progress, the number of enemies you have to deal with in an alert also increases, so you'll never really have enough RAM in an encounter to be able to hack everybody that's involved without actually needing to fight. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to kill the enemy. You can disable them, and there are a number of ways that you can do that, again through skills, perks, and abilities. But at some point you are going to have to engage the enemy directly. You can't just sit behind a box and hack everybody into oblivion. The stealth system is pretty straightforward and standard for games of this type. They're not really doing anything new here. However, to really effectively use it, it does require elements out of both the skill system and out of the implant and equipment systems. This seems to have been set up to try and prevent a situation where you can create something like Skyrim's Stealth Archer and wipe the floor with the game. You can still build that and it will still be incredibly powerful, but it's going to be a little bit more involved to put all the pieces together for it, and you won't be able to build it quite so early, as you will need to level up and you will need access to specific gear. That does bring us to the progression system, however, and there are several layers to it. So, attributes and perks. Pretty straightforward. For attributes, you have body, which covers health and endurance-based perks, along with melee and unarmed and blunt abilities. Reflexes, which covers pistols, rifles, and bladed weapons. Technical ability, which covers crafting and engineering abilities. Intelligence, which covers your hacking. And cool, which covers your stealth and an interesting little perk tree called Cold-Blooded. Spending a point on any attribute applies a flat improvement to all perks held under the attribute and unlocks more of the perk trees that these skills or these attributes govern. The perks are again pretty straightforward. Some give new abilities on their own, while others apply a percentage-based improvement to an existing skill. So the whole system scales nicely, and the perk trees for each weapon and ability are pretty well fleshed out with a lot of options. The system doesn't do anything new, but it's robust enough that you could do several playthroughs focusing on different playstyles and get a different experience from the mechanics each time. As I mentioned before, some gameplay options such as stealth are very dependent on perks and attributes. This is also where a lot of the jank in the shooting can be cleaned up. For example, there are perks in the handgun tree that increase damage, as you would expect, but also improve weapons handling, including the time it takes to aim, reload, look down the sights, and so on. While the start of the game guns can feel really heavy and sluggish, after the points have been spent on these skills they become rather fluid and smooth. So some of the jank in the way the guns handle earlier on is actually intended and countered via the skill system. I'm not entirely sure if I personally like the way this is done, but it is what it is. The gear system, as mentioned, is a pretty standard rainbow colour, standard through legendary RPG gear system. Items can drop from enemies, can be found in the environment, or can be paid for in stores. Some items can also be upgraded via a crafting system. Equipping the gear is limited by 2 levels primarily. The first is the primary character level, and the second is street cred. Primary level is exactly what it sounds like, and I should not need to explain this to anybody who's played an RPG before. But street cred is a second blocker based around your reputation in game. It's not quite the way it sounds, it's far more simplistic. It's basically a second level bar that goes up when you do side quests for different street factions. Some of the better gear has both a level requirement and a street cred requirement. This means that if you want to get access to some of the best gear in the game, you will need to do those side quests around the map. Thankfully, it's pretty simple to level, and it levels faster than your standard level, so it's probably only going to limit people that try and speed run the main story while avoiding all of the side quests. If you happen to be like me and wander off to do side quests left, right, and centre the second they sort of encounter, you're probably not going to find the street cred system overly limiting. I've only actually ran into a couple of items where I couldn't actually equip them as a result of street cred, and all of those items dropped from hostile NPCs that were actually at a significantly higher level than I was, from quests that were probably a little bit higher level than I should have been doing that I managed to complete anyway. So that's kind of understandable. The street cred system, as best as I can tell, exists entirely to stop people doing the standard RPG thing of the second you get into the free roam, running around and doing just the specific quests that drop the best gear and leaving it at that. You can still do that, and you will still be able to unlock all of the best gear, but the street cred requirement will prevent you from being able to use it until you've done a whole bunch of other side quests as well. So there's not really much of a point to trying that. And if you want to speedrun just the main storyline, you're simply not going to have access to the best gear. And last of all, the cybernetic implant system. Now, this one here I can't go too deep into because some of it is actually tied into the story, or at least it's tied into some of the story elements. So, I will say, the cybernetic upgrades, the system itself operates very similar to your standard gear system, except you can only change them around at a Ripperdoc. So specific points in the map you have to go to in order to adjust your cybernetics. The cybernetics are behind both a leveling system, behind the street cred system, and do come with a significant cost in some areas to be able to afford, so you will need to be able to make money for them, but they will not only enhance existing abilities that you have, they do add entirely new abilities, and more than that, they can add additional weapons, mostly in the form of melee weapons, that give you, again, more gameplay options. That's really all I can say there. I don't want to go into spoilers because spoiler-free video. So, speaking of spoilers, let's talk about the story. Talking about the story in a spoiler-free video, talk about doing things by hard mode. Anyways, I'll be honest with the story, at this point I haven't completed it. I have left the last act alone as I want to complete the last act with everybody on a series on the channel. I do, however, have well over 40 hours in the game, mostly running around doing side quests and exploring the world, as well as completing everything up to that final act. The main story that I've experienced up until this point is absolutely fantastic. I'm really enjoying it. Some of the side quests are also really good. Some of them not so much, but we'll get to that. They're not perfect. The voice acting and presentation in the main story is excellent across the board. Mr. Breathtaking steals every scene he pops into, and it's actually taken me quite a lot of effort to not complete that main story at this point. I could easily push it over with my character right now. I'm just holding off for reasons mentioned. That said, there were a few parts of the story that were predictable up until the point that I'm at, and I expect you will see those twists coming long before they land. I'll just leave that there. The side quests and mini missions are a little bit more hit and miss. Some of them, such as one I did involving rescuing someone from a street gang without being detected, was very well designed with fantastic voice acting, so good in fact that it would have served as a main story mission in most other open world games that I've played. On the other hand, I've ran into some that feel a little odd or misplaced, with things like, in one case, a Night City Police Department squad car parked on the side of the road doing what is clearly meant to be a license check of a driver, and directly across the road, not 15 metres away, in plain sight of the police, there is a mission to take out a street gang that's currently in the process of beating a person to death with a baseball bat, and the police have no reaction to this whatsoever. Also, while for the most part the voice acting in the side quests is perfectly acceptable, it's fine, I have ran into a couple of lines here and there that do sound distinctly phoned in. In the end, most, not all, but most of these side quests do still feel distinctly GTA styled, where they're kind of just a thing you go and do and then you get paid. Not like Witcher 3's stories that were, or side quests that felt more like a distinctive story into itself, which is kind of a little disappointing. Although there are a couple that are that way, but they just don't seem to be as common. Now, an important thing to know is that some of these side quests do tie back into the main story, giving small hints or insights into what is happening. They're not strictly required to do in order to finish the story, but to fully realise the story, they should be done. Again, avoiding spoilers is hard here, but to put it simply, the story is good to great, with a few surprises along the way that I've already encountered, but it's by no means perfect, and it does have a few predictable points as well. The side quests and the runabout work on the map is actually quite enjoyable, but it also has its share of issues, and I don't think it's quite as involved as or well designed as some of the quests that were present in The Witcher. Alright, so we got this far, it's time to address the tyrannid in the room. Bugs and performance. Now, I'm not going to dig too deeply into this one, as I'm not that kind of a channel, but I do want to go over it a little bit. The performance and the bugs in regards to Cyberpunk 2077 does appear to vary wildly, which is why everyone seems to have a different take on it. I myself have experienced 2 crash to desktops. One of those I triggered myself trying to push the limits of my current hardware, which is, as in the video description down below, a 2700X and a 1070 with 32GB of RAM. More on that in a moment. The other crash was one where I was simply riding a bike down the highway, exploring the world, and got dumped for no apparent reason. Others that I know, such as Deadmeat, who you've seen on this channel before if you've been around here for a while, I fly with him regularly, who has a significantly better system than me with a 3000 series GPU and a 2080 Ti, couldn't even play on release as the game was continuously crashing to desktop every few minutes. Crash to desktops, as far as I can tell, talking to quite a few people playing the game at the moment, all with significantly different hardware configurations, doesn't seem to be related to the age of the hardware at all. I'm not entirely sure where the trigger is for it here, but there's clearly some work that CD Projekt Red has yet to do. As for bugs in-game, yeah, there are quite a few of those. Most seeming to be based around the physics system. I'm not entirely sure why or what's going on with it, but the physics system and the collision meshes seem to be behind most of them. I've experienced short joy flights over skyscrapers after hitting pedestrians at moderate speeds in the middle of the city as a car simply bounces into the sky. I've seen NPCs enjoying their lunch, sitting down at a quote-unquote table that doesn't exist and levitating 7 feet in the air over an actively used road. Items and bodies simply phasing through the ground after death, making them impossible to recover. So far that last one hasn't caused me any game-breaking issues, but I can see easily how it could if a body that had a quest-related item on it was to phase through the floor. And this is after the delay for the bug fixing, the day 1 patch, and the 4 gig day 2 patch fix. CD Projekt Red pulled a Bethesda here, and we can expect months of bug-fixing patches going forward. And there's no real defense for this either. I mean, I'm sitting here in my office at the moment, and I have a poster on the wall behind me right now that I got from PAX Oz in 2019 with the original April 16th, 2020 release date on it. This game was delayed for bug fixing and polishing for 8 months. Bugs are unavoidable in any piece of software. I fully expect to see bugs. But I also expected to see better than my character growing a second set of arms in photo mode, or randomly glitching into the standing position on the bike while I'm riding it from the third-person view, with the level of delays we've seen here, especially with how often these little glitches happen. They do throw you out of the immersion on a game that is, when you get a clean run and no bugs poke their heads up, actually very immersive. So that's really it. I can't go much deeper without starting to hit spoilers, so I'll wrap this up by saying, all the hype and bullshit aside, Cyberpunk 2077 is a good game. It's not world-changing, it's not rewriting how games will be played or made, and it's not even really doing anything new. It's just a good game in an interesting setting with an interesting story and characters that is using some pretty commonly used systems and has some rather significant crash and bug issues on release that will need some serious patching. Its biggest issue, if I was to be honest, is that its own hype really blew it up. Anyways, ladies and gents, that concludes the spoiler-free video for the, 3 people that haven't already bought the game at this point. So thanks very much for watching. I guess I better start a fresh playthrough for you guys. So I'm actually going to let you guys who have gotten this far make the decision on exactly what I'm going to be playing. Should I do a Nomad start, a Corpo start, or a Street Kid start? I'll let you guys choose. Let me know in the comment section down below. And at some point during the playthrough, there will be a couple of videos on my current hardware, and then I will be jumping to the new hardware. So you're actually going to see the quality change as I jump over as well, just to top things off. Anyways, guys, I'm going to leave that one here. Until next time, remember to click the like button if you did, share and subscribe if you want to see more, and all that jazz. You guys know how this all works. And as always, next video will have spoilers, so keep that in mind, and take care.